Earthworm Jim Menace to the Galaxy is a game that is often overlooked in the series, either being completely forgotten in retrospectives like in the Angry Video Game Nerd episode on the franchise, and, perhaps even worse, my own video on Earthworm Jim, or relegated to just a small footnote at the end of a video, getting a fraction of the screen time as the other mainline games in the series. And yeah, duh, I get it, I can't blame anyone for that, especially when that would involve blaming myself for anything. It's a game that no one really remembers, no one really played, or really actually cares about. Its Wikipedia article is full of misinformation, and even spaces made for and maintained by fans of the series, like the Earthworm Jim wiki, are incredibly sparse on entries for it when compared to the other games. But seeing that Earthworm Jim 4 has been cancelled, by my counting, 3 times now, with the odds of ever getting a new game looking literally impossible, why not take a look back on the Earthworm Jim 4 we actually got, and see if it's worth playing today, even if it's only the 4th game in the series by the slimmest of margins, releasing 6 days after Earthworm Jim 3D. Like a dog sat on the floor by the table of bigger YouTubers, I look at the scraps left over that no one wants to touch, and I'm ready to dig in. And what better way is there than that to describe Paw Patrol, the show where we look at weird and interesting ports and spin-offs of our favourite games. And today we're taking a look at Earthworm Jim Menace to the Galaxy. Not developed by Shiny Entertainment, creators of Earthworm Jim 1 and 2, or Viz Entertainment, creators of Earthworm Jim 3D, Menace to the Galaxy was instead produced by David A. Palmer Productions. They're notable for creating the Gameboy versions of the Gex games, according to the Gex wiki at least. If you're watching one of my videos though, presumably because you're a fan of Paw Patrol, because, let's be honest, who the fuck cares about Earthworm Jim Menace to the Galaxy? You did not just randomly stumble upon this video out of nowhere. Then you probably know them for the really good port of Doom they made for the Game Boy Advance. So that's cool. Though, unfortunately, at this particular time of their existence, they weren't making anything nearly as cool as Doom, mainly just working on movie tie-in games like Men in Black. So I guess them also working on Gex is oddly appropriate. I presume they were called in to make this game because it ties into the Earthworm Jim cartoon show, which would track, apart from the fact the game came out 3 years after the show had already ended. The game also isn't a sequel or anything, it just has a 2 in the title to be confusing to me when I was a kid. And it's a big departure from all the other games in the series, not really looking, sounding, or playing like any of them. And it's really hard to know where to start with it, so before getting onto any of that, I just want to talk about something that really stood out to me while playing it. It's completely lacking all of the creativity and identity you'd usually expect from an Earthworm Jim game. It's almost comical how generic the levels are when you compare them to past examples with similar themes in the older games. Earthworm Jim 3D had a graveyard level called Boogie Nights of the Living Dead, a play on the death of disco, so the level is full of vinyl players, dance floors, and throwed zombies all smashed together with a horror aesthetic which, even if playing on old established tropes, still has a lot of its own original weird stuff in it too. Menace to the Galaxy has Graveyard. Earthworm Jim 1 and 2 went to the effort of fleshing out individual planets, like Insectica and Heck. Menace to the Galaxy has Sci-Fi. Instead of unique locations like towering junkyards, so vast they're considered cities, secret underwater laboratories, or spooky mansions that are haunted by the ghosts of chickens, entirely just for the sake of having a stupid pun as the level title, you now get great hits like Bedroom, Garden, and Sweet Shop. And this is really weird, right? I wouldn't expect a Game Boy game to be able to go as in detail with its world building as all those examples I mentioned there, but like, it could do something. Let alone for Earthworm Jim, how in any game were these random mishmash of levels ever meant to feel cohesive with one another, and not just like a jumbled mixture of themes that feel like they were pulled from a hat at random? Why is it like this? None of David's, yeah, we're on a first name basis now, other Game Boy games seemed so randomly disjointed. Gex still had movie-based levels. Part of me wants to think that this game was a rush job, which, considering the fact it's a Game Boy game and seems to be mostly based on Gex, probably isn't too far from the truth, and all they had were these random scrapped assets lying around from old projects, and just bundled them together here. It's the only thing that makes sense to me, but even then feels far-fetched, because like, what projects would they have been working on to get such a jumbled random collection of themes in the first place? Nothing about it makes sense to me, and any explanation I think of to try and explain it just raises more questions in my head. So fuck it. Earthworm Jim's a game where you walk around a bedroom now, I guess. Whatever. Okay, whatever. What's actually in the levels is also just as generic as the names would imply too. About the closest to anything Earthworm Jim this Earthworm Jim game gets are the toilets that you can get sucked into like a weird-ass Mario pipe. Like, oh, this is the sci-fi level, so it has a little green Marvin the Martian looking ass Martian in it. The candy shop enemies are just candy canes and polo mints that have come to life. The subway level has vending machines that spit Coke cans at you, and giant rats in the bathrooms, really showing their dedication to capturing the true London Underground experience. It gives the levels a very... I don't know how to describe it, like the perfect type of fodder for a 2008 era angry video game nerd to make fun of. That's a very specific energy, and this is going to be such a deep cut, I know. I'm referencing a decade-old Let's Play. But just like when Game Grumps played Mickey Mousecapades while doing their best/worst impression of the Game Dude, a notorious AVGN clone from back in the day, once you start noticing things in this game, it just keeps building up in your head, and before you know it, you're interpreting everything in an AVGN-like fashion. Like, what were they thinking? Probably the closest this game gets to actually feeling like Earthworm Jim, then, is the soundtrack. The series has always had incredible music, thanks to the amazing work that Tommy Tallarico said he did, and then turned out he didn't. And Menace to the Galaxy mostly gets it right. Some tracks here are absolute bangers. City and Desolation are two big standouts for me. But while most of the soundtrack does fuck, halfway through the game for 2 levels, bedroom and candy shop, the music suddenly suck, turning into the most depressing thing you've heard in your entire life. Like the candy shop level, it should be an upbeat, happy, catchy song, you know, representing the sweet treats inside and the happiness you'd be getting from going there as a kid. And then you hear the song. I hate it. Bedroom is even worse. It reminds me of the playrooms from Shadow Man. like a song that should be reserved for a level where you dive into the psyche of the main character to discover some repressed childhood trauma. Not a game where you play as a cartoon worm shooting teddy bears. These are the two longest levels in the game, and I hate listening to both their songs. It's like they actually deal psychic damage to my soul. Okay, now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let's talk about the gameplay. How different is that to the other games? Well, it's definitely been simplified, but that isn't really a bad thing. The original Earthworm Jim used 3 buttons, and its port to the original Game Boy that came out a few years before Menace to the Galaxy definitely suffered because of that, awkwardly mapping both whip and shoot to the same button, depending on how long you hold it down for. So they've simplified here. Whipping is just completely gone. So on the one hand, it does mean there's no swinging from hooks anymore, but I didn't end up missing having it as an attack, because ammo was so plentiful. Same goes for the helicopter head. I guess there's technically no reason why it couldn't be here, it's just mashing the jump button, but it isn't. Again though, I didn't find it too weird not having it. It would probably break all the platforming in this game if you could just so easily hover over all the jumps. The only time I did find myself sorely missing it was right at the start of the game, because jumping is weird. I was out here just pressing the jump button. You know, like a fool, an idiot apparently. All this does is a little piddly piss jump. Way too small to jump over like 99% of all the obstacles in this game. It's virtually useless after the second level. If you want to use the jump that isn't shit, and the one you'll actually be using for the entire game, for some reason instead of being default, you have to hold up on the D-pad every time you jump. I have no idea why it's like this, and it's pretty much the only bad thing in this game for me controls-wise. Jim is quick, responsive, and isn't finicky at all, so it's a shame that they ruined that by making me do an upside-down Hadouken every time I need to jump over a hole. I guess the only other kinda lame thing on the Jim front is his weaponry. It's an impressive arsenal until you look at it for more than 2 seconds. There's 4 guns in the game. Your default blaster, which is basically just a machine gun, and then there's the machine gun. You might be able to see where I'm going with this. I think it either fires slightly faster or does slightly more damage than the default blaster, but not actually enough to leave any impression on me in my notes. I genuinely couldn't tell a difference apart from the fact it sounds different. You also have Plasma, which only fires 1 shot at a time but kills every enemy in the game in 1 hit. And then finally the Rocket Launcher, which fires 1 shot at a time but kills every enemy in the game in 1 hit. You could put a gun up to my head and ask me what the difference between the 2 is, and I would just ask you to pull the trigger. I genuinely haven't got a clue. At the very least, actually using the guns is pretty good. Still retaining the original game's 8-directional aiming, and being able to shoot at enemies who are off-screen wasn't something I was expecting to be able to do, but I could, and it was very good. It was good, yeah. Wow, that sentence fucking got away from me there, didn't it? So, honestly, despite my reservations, I don't hate how the game feels to play. Jim controls mostly great, and blowing up enemies with the rocket launcher or plasma is way more satisfying than it has any right to be. What I do hate though is how you play through the game. These aren't your typical linear platformer levels, they're almost like 2D collectathons, where the levels are wide open, sprawling, and you need to collect literal hundreds of whatever the hell the red things are in order to not beat the level, but unlock the exit which is hidden somewhere that you can then walk to beat the level. On some levels this is fine. Sci-fi and laboratory are mostly pretty linear, with only one main path through the level that occasionally splits, so it's easy to know where you have and haven't been. But then there's levels like Bedroom and Candy Shop, and where you're already afflicted with a depression buff from the music, but they're also absolutely massive, with loads of different paths to go down, none of them really connecting to each other, instead feeling like a random jumble of platforms with no rhyme or reason to the placement of any of them. Doors that take you to completely separate areas of the map that are isolated from the rest of the level, and it spawns you right in the middle of it. Like, look at these maps. It's like someone threw Lego onto a bit of paper and traced around where it landed. And because the levels are designed this way, there isn't really anything memorable to any of them. No real landmarks or easily identifiable areas for you to follow along. Hell, even a map would have been nice. They're all completely convoluted and easy to get lost in. I genuinely think, apart from the first two levels, which are obviously the easiest, only one other level in the entire game actually felt like it was designed and had actual thought put into it. The subway level is laid out to feel like you're walking down two sides of the same train platform, using the toilets on each side to reach the other. There's puzzles to solve, electrified rail lines you need to disable to progress further through the level, even something simple like having to time my jumps to not get hit by obstacles felt new and exciting compared to everything else this game had thrown at me. It actually had structure, it was actually fun, and feels designed, and not just like a 5-year-old who got Mario Maker for the first time and put down a bunch of random enemies. Enemies which are dead easy to deal with, by the way, mainly just walking back and forth on the spot, or bouncing in an easily predictable pattern, and barely inflicting any damage when they do touch you. But even all of that wasn't the worst part of this game, the thing that was the deal breaker for me. As lame as a lot of the levels are, there is still a little crumb of fun to be had in them, finding items like Snot or the Rocket to help you reach areas you couldn't otherwise. By the end of my time playing, I was even developing my own techs, abusing the damage bounce Jim gets when touching spikes to get onto ledges I otherwise couldn't reach. Sure, while I think Subway is the best this game ever gets, and I wish the other levels were more like it, there's still a certain appeal to using the tools and techniques the game gives you to try and navigate these horrible sprawling levels in different ways and collect the hundreds of items you need to beat the level. And that right there is the deal breaker. You have to collect these hundreds of items all in one life. I cannot begin to count the amount of times I collected everything I needed to beat the level, and while trying to figure out where the fuck the exit was in these super samey looking places, fell down a hole and got unceremoniously placed back at the beginning of the level, all progress gone. It was infuriating, it really fucked me off, because there's no reason for it to be so frustrating. There were so many ways that they could have made it fairer, and did none of them. Make the holes just damage you when you fall in them instead of kill you. Have the lives actually mean something, so it's only if you lose all of them that you lose your progress in the level. Give me an arrow or any indication of where the exit to the level is, so I actually know where to go. A checkpoint system would be nice. Or just don't have me collect so many of them in the first place. Like, holy shit. Everything good I said about this game, everything I enjoyed and appreciated, is all completely ruined by the game being designed this way. Because the moment you get lost in a level, get impatient trying to find where you're going, and you die and lose all that progress, it's probably the worst thing to ever happen to any human being in the history of mankind. The Titanic, World War II, 9/11, these disasters pale in comparison to falling down a hole after playing Bedroom for 20 minutes. You can only begin to imagine my pain. And that's really it. If it wasn't for the game destroying your progress every time you die, I would have probably recommended this game. It controls well, the music is mostly good. I haven't even talked about the graphics. I think they look really good. The animation on Jim is especially really nice and smooth. But none of that matters, because it's so annoying to play through. Had there not been passwords for this game online, I would have never finished this video. I would have refused to play Candy Shop any more than I already did. Despite that though, I can't deny that the game, it did have this weird grip on me. It became a micro-obsession of mine for a couple of weeks. Like, information on this game is so thin, and what is there is wrong in so many ways. Wikipedia says the fourth weapon you can get is a grenade launcher when there isn't a grenade launcher in the game. The Earthworm Jim wiki also mentions the grenades, says there's only 100 red nuts in every level, when I think every level in the game needs you to collect way more than that. And it has this completely made up out of the blue line, saying the way to beat the level is by bribing an enchanted toilet with the nuts, and then jumping down through its magical plumbing to the next level/world in a parody of Mario. Which is just a bonkers weird sentence. I literally have no idea what they're talking about. You don't bribe toilets in this game. It says there are 12 levels. One of the first things you see in this game is a level select screen with 9 levels on it. Okay, so you all see it, right? Very obviously, there are only 8 levels listed here. I forgot that you don't unlock the 9th level until after beating the game. I still don't really know where the number 12 came from, though. The only thing I can think of is the wiki listed the 8 main levels and then the 4 bosses. So maybe it's that. Seeing all of this as apparently the only person in the world who has actually played this game in like 2 decades, put me in a weird position where I was like, I could fix this. Like, clearly no one else ever will. So I did. The articles on Wikipedia and the Earthworm Jim wiki have all been revamped and are hopefully more accurate and a little more helpful now. I don't know why I cared so much, but someone had to, and even despite how much the game annoyed me, and how much I still don't think you should really go and play it or anything, something about it clearly charmed me. It's a weird little game that does Earthworm Jim so weirdly, when an example of how to do Earthworm Jim on Gameboy already existed 4 years before it even came out. Maybe play that one instead. I probably should have talked about that one too instead of this. And so the wait for a true Earthworm Jim 4 continues. Truly one of the most cursed game franchises of all time. Peaking with its very first game, the sequel is well received, but in hindsight, kind of feels like they ran out of ideas on the very first level. Every other stage in the game having some weird gimmick to it, when all you want to do is play an actual Earthworm Jim level. The series jumps to 3D after a lengthy, painful development cycle, releasing 3 years after the TV show it was meant to tie in with had ended, and that rough dev cycle really showed. It looked unrecognisable compared to previously released gameplay of early builds, and the European version of the box art even showed locations that weren't in the final game. Despite all that though, it was fine. Middling, average, funnily enough, one of its biggest problems being exactly the same as Menace to the Galaxy. Its gameplay involving collecting hundreds of an item whose progress is reset every time you die. Menace to the Galaxy would release 6 days later, and every attempt to revive the series since has failed. PSP reboot? Cancelled. Earthworm Jim 2003? Cancelled. The latest revival attempt, which was also cancelled, was going to release on the Intellivision Amico. I don't think I need to say any more than that. They announced a new Earthworm Jim cartoon was coming out and it looked really promising. But they released one trailer for it, and all social media channels have since gone completely silent. I was able to find an interview with some random guy. I genuinely don't know who he is, but it's like from August or something last year. Apparently he works with Interplay, or whoever owns Earthworm Jim now, and did some merch for them, and he says the show is still happening. I don't really know what to think. It's a bit weird. I don't know who this guy is. I don't know why I'm trusting him. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Related to the new cartoon, there was also meant to be Eden, an NFT video game project, which I feel like I don't need to elaborate on. That's embarrassing enough already. But with Eden, that embarrassment is layers deep. Because if there's one thing you can say about NFT games like Axie Infinity and... well, okay, that's the only one I can name. But at least Axie Infinity came out. Eden never got that far. The website is still up, but contains no useful information to any sane human being who hasn't had their brain poisoned by buying into Web3. The laughably titled roadmap doesn't contain any dates on when any features can be expected, or even when the game itself would launch. And if you try and join the project's Discord server, because it's an NFT project, before you can properly join, a bot prompts you to turn off your DMs, because they know without it your inbox would be flooded with scams and links to other NFT projects. They know your inbox would be flooded with scams. Upon joining, it's completely dead. No one talks in it anymore apart from to comment on how dead the project is, and scrolling up, even when the project was alive, on average it would get about 5 new messages a day. They had no chance of getting the 10,000 required dirt sales. I don't know how this works. They needed to sell 10,000 things before the game would start, and they couldn't even get more than 5 people to send a Discord message a day. There was no chance Eden was ever going to happen. It's embarrassing, and just like the TV show, seemingly completely abandoned. Not to mention, how the fuck does any of this relate to Earthworm Jim? Probably just about the only good thing to happen to Jim lately is that Doug TenNapel, the series creator, made his own comic series about Jim that did really well on Indiegogo and looks really good. It's a shame then that if you go to Doug's Twitter or YouTube accounts, you won't see anything cool related to his really nice art, but instead just him complaining about gay people, spreading anti-vax conspiracy theories, posting videos with the same title over and over again for reasons that escape me, and probably worst of all, peddling the seemingly never-ending new NFT projects he makes. What is it about Earthworm Jim and NFTs? How did this happen? But hey, you never know. Maybe one day Earthworm Jim will actually finally come back for real this time. So until then, I guess I've just got to replay Menace to the Galaxy for another 20 years.